A unified theory of getting rich, getting lucky, and getting real note to the listener. What you're about to hear shouldn't work. It shouldn't make sense. You're about to listen to a book that claims the same principles that allowed George Soros to break the Bank of England are the exact principles that will allow you to give your partner a transcendent, intimate massage. You're about to hear that Warren Buffett's investing philosophy is essentially tantric sex for your portfolio. You're about to discover that a man who went from crying alone on New Year's Eve to having women approach him in bars was applying Paul Volcker's inflation, fighting discipline to his own desperate neediness. I know how this sounds. I laughed too. Then I stopped laughing. Because here's the thing. After spending months steeped in the writings of financial titans, tantric masters, and men who have dedicated their lives to understanding desire, both the markets and the bodies, I realized they're all describing the same underlying reality. They just use different vocabulary. Where Soros writes about reflexivity and boom and bust cycles, the tantric texts speak of the interplay of Shiva and Shakti, the build-up and circulation of sacred energy. Where Buffett preaches patience and margin of safety, the intimate massage guide insists you go slow, no exceptions. Where Volcker demonstrates that sometimes you must impose painful discipline to restore stability, the reformed nice guy learns that not chasing, not begging, not needing is the most attractive thing a man can do. This book is the synthesis. It's your guide to navigating complex systems, whether that system is the global currency market, your investment portfolio, or the exquisite, terrifying, and deeply rewarding landscape of intimate connection. Strap in. We're going deep, and we're going to laugh. Because if you can't see the humor in comparing a central banker to a man learning to delay his own orgasm, you might be taking yourself too seriously for any of this to work. Introduction, the 4 Sages, and the 5th Secret. What we'll learn. Meet our guides, 3 financial wizards and 1 reformed nice guy turned seduction coach, and discover the hidden thread that connects their mastery. We'll establish why thinking like a Federal Reserve chairman might just save your love life, and why the patience of a value investor is the secret to mind-blowing sex. Why it matters. Because the same mental models that predict market crashes also predict relationship crashes, and the same techniques that create billion-dollar fortunes can create. Well, let's just say wealth comes in many forms. Picture this. It's 2008. The global financial system is melting down. The smartest economists in the world, Nobel Prize winners, people who use words like heteroskedasticity at dinner parties, are completely blindsided. A later analysis of 51 top economic forecasters found that out of 102 separate predictions for GDP and unemployment, 101 of them were wrong in the exact same direction. 101 experts, all facing the wrong way, while the ship hit the iceberg. But a handful of people saw it coming. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, had been warning about financial weapons of mass destruction for years. George Soros, the man who once made $1 billion in a single day by betting against the British pound, had been writing about the super bubble since the late 1990s. Paul Volcker, the towering former Federal Reserve chairman who strangled inflation in the 1980s, had been watching with growing alarm as his successors dismantled every regulatory safeguard he'd spent a career building. 3 sages, 3 completely different approaches, 1 shared truth. Now let's introduce 2 more voices, seemingly from a different universe. The first is a woman named Anna who wrote a guide for men on how to perform an intimate massage that is, in her words, an act of sensual trust between 2 people. She emphasizes slowness, presence, the importance of creating a safe space, the radical idea that the man's pleasure is not the goal, that by focusing entirely on her, something magical happens for both of them. The second is a man named Chris, who spent years as a lonely, depressed nice guy, trying every pick-up technique in the book, only to discover that the secret was to stop trying, to own his desire without apology, to be so grounded in himself that women literally approached him in bars. He calls it effortless seduction, and his journey from rock bottom to genuine connection is a masterclass in the very principles our financial sages embody. Here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting I mean potentially life-changing in ways you didn't expect from a book that mentions both central banking and the G-spot. The more I read, the more I realized the market masters and the intimacy masters were describing the same underlying reality. They just used different vocabulary. Where Soros saw reflexivity, the two-way feedback loop where perception shapes reality, which shapes perception, Anna the massage guide describes the exact same dynamic. I loved it when my partner would play with my pussy lips. He would hunt for my clitoris with focus, and sometimes he did it and maintained eye contact as he did so. When he touched it or got close, he would use my facial cues or moans as a homing beacon. That's reflexivity in the bedroom. The man's actions are guided by her reactions. Her reactions are shaped by his actions. They are co-creating the experience in real time, just as Soros describes market participants co-creating the price of a currency. Where Buffett preaches the power of compounding, letting your returns build upon returns over decades, the tantric texts, and Anna and Chris, all emphasize the power of not rushing to climax, of letting the energy build, circulate, and compound. As Chris writes, the secret here is that the above is simply a belief which I choose to have. You can consciously choose any beliefs you want, so I pick the negative version, which only serves to limit your life experience. That's not just dating advice. That's the core of Buffett's entire investment philosophy. Where Volcker understood that sometimes you must impose painful discipline, jacking up interest rates to 20%, causing a recession, to break the back of inflation and restore long-term stability, Chris describes a similar dynamic in seduction. I'm not having sex with you, she says. What he hears is, I want you so bad, I want this, but I'm not sure how you will view me if I do, so I want to wait until I know a bit more and figure this thing out. The disciplined man doesn't push, he doesn't plead, he holds space, he trusts the process, and the result is a far deeper, more explosive connection than if he had rushed. This book is the synthesis. It's your guide to understanding both the maelstrom of global markets and the mysteries of intimate connection, because as you'll discover, they're the same thing. A complex, reflexive system where human psychology, desire, and fear constantly interact and reshape the landscape. Previously in this audiobook, yes, we're doing this. You'll thank me later. We haven't started yet, but imagine we had. Imagine we just learned how George Soros escaped Nazi-occupied Hungary by pretending to be his own godson, and we're about to connect that to the proper technique for tracing a figure 8 over your partner's clitoris. Because we will. Key takeaway: the greatest investors, the greatest lovers, and the most genuinely attractive men all share one trait. They understand that reality is not fixed, it's shaped by perception, and mastering that feedback loop is the secret to everything. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Would Be King, of breaking central banks and his own neediness. What we'll learn: George Soros' journey from hiding from Nazis to hunting currencies, and Chris the nice guy's journey from crying alone on New Year's Eve to effortless connection. We'll explore how near-death experiences and rock-bottom moments forge the kind of unshakable internal state that is the foundation of all mastery. Why it matters: because both Soros and Chris discovered the same truth. When you stop caring about the outcome, you become powerful enough to shape it. Let me tell you about two 14-year-old boys. The first is in Budapest, 1944. The Nazis have taken over Hungary. Jews are being rounded up and shipped to death camps. This boy's father, Tivadar, is a survivor, a man who escaped from a Russian prisoner of war camp during World War I and made his way home through the chaos of the Russian Revolution. Tivadar secures false identity papers, he finds hiding places, he pays bribes. At one point, young George is living with a Hungarian official who's supposed to be cataloguing confiscated Jewish property. George's job is to accompany the man on his rounds, essentially to be the official's young apprentice while the man is actively working with Nazis. For most 14-year-olds, this would be paralyzing terror. For George Soros, it was, and I quote, thrilling, like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now the second boy, he's not in a war zone. He's in a bar on New Year's Eve, 2010. The room is full of friends, acquaintances, people he spent years trying to impress. The clock strikes midnight. Everyone celebrates, kisses, hugs, laughter, and there he stands, completely alone. He slaps a giant grin across his face, the one he's so used to wearing, to hide the sadness and depression that governs his life. His name is Chris. Chris's realization that night was as profound in its own way as Soros's wartime survival instinct. I do not fucking care anymore. He had spent years trying to be 50 different people, depending on what he thought would make each individual like him most. He had completely lost any idea of who he was. His immune system had packed in. He was sick, lonely, and utterly exhausted from the performance. I had hit rock bottom, Chris writes. I had two options: to end it all, as nothing was worth continuing this agony, or decided to try one more thing, stop giving a fuck and be the guy who has nothing to lose. Now let's pause and absorb the parallel. A Jewish teenager in Nazi-occupied Hungary finds the experience thrilling. A lonely man at a New Year's party decides that the only way forward is to stop caring. This is not normal. This is the emotional forging of men who in their respective arenas would become unstoppable. Soros survived the war, made his way to London, and discovered the philosopher Karl Popper, whose concept of the open society and the principle of falsifiability shaped his entire intellectual framework. Soros took Popper's critique of totalitarian ideologies and applied it to economics. If political ideologies were unfalsifiable fairy tales, what about the efficient market hypothesis? What about the idea that markets are always right? Chris, meanwhile, made a similar philosophical shift, albeit in a less academic context. He threw away his pick, up books. He stopped trying to game women. He made an agreement with himself. If I felt angry, be angry. Don't hide it. I gave myself permission to be a grumpy asshole. If I felt sad, be sad. Cry, sob, sulk, externalize how I felt. And then the magic happened. The same kind of magic that would later allow Soros to bet billions against the Bank of England. Chris was sitting in the corner of a dark bar in Ireland by himself, oozing a pissed-off but incredibly free vibe. A beautiful woman kept looking at him. He didn't care. She approached him. She asked if he was okay. He was matter-of-fact, blunt, utterly unimpressed with himself or with her. 2 hours later she told him, "Chris, you have no idea how horny you are making me. I want to go home with you." He had done nothing, and it was the most transformative experience of his life. Key takeaway: the ability to stay calm when everyone else is panicking, whether in a currency crisis or in the presence of a beautiful woman, isn't just a personality trait. It's forged in experiences that make the current stakes seem trivial. When you have nothing to prove, you become the most powerful person in the room. Chapter 2: Reflexivity, or Why Markets and Lovers Are Always Wrong. What we'll learn: Soros's master concept, reflexivity, explained through financial crashes, intimate massages, and that moment when you say "I'm fine" and your partner knows you're not. We'll see why the efficient market hypothesis is bunk, and why believing your partner's words when their body is screaming something else is equally dangerous. Why it matters. Because once you understand reflexivity, you'll never look at a stock chart, a relationship argument, or the subtle cues of arousal the same way again. The prevailing wisdom in economics, especially from the Chicago School, is that markets are efficient. They incorporate all available information. Prices are always right, given what we know. Bubbles can't happen because rational actors would never bid up prices beyond fundamental value. Soros thought this was nonsense, and he had a word for why: reflexivity. Here's the basic idea, and I want you to really sit with this because it's the Rosetta Stone for everything that follows. In natural science, there's a clear separation between the observer and the observed. When a physicist measures a particle, the particle doesn't change its behavior just because it knows it's being watched. Facts are facts, independent of what anyone thinks about them. But in human affairs, including financial markets, the participants' thinking is part of the situation they're trying to understand. There's a two-way feedback loop. What people believe affects what happens, and what happens affects what people believe. Soros calls this the human uncertainty principle, a deliberate echo of Heisenberg. You cannot simultaneously have perfect knowledge and perfect participation. Let me make this concrete. Suppose investors believe that tech stocks are going to soar. They buy tech stocks. Tech stocks do soar. This confirms their belief, so they buy more. The rising stock prices allow tech companies to issue more shares and raise more capital. They use that capital to invest in real growth. The fundamentals actually improve. The belief created the reality that justified the belief. This is a self-reinforcing process. Soros calls it a boom, but it can't go on forever. Eventually, expectations outrun what's actually possible. A trigger event occurs. The belief cracks. People sell. Prices fall. The falling prices confirm the new negative belief, so more people sell. The companies that were relying on ever-rising stock prices to fund their operations suddenly can't. The fundamentals deteriorate. The negative belief creates the reality that justifies the negative belief. This is the bust. Now let's go to the bedroom, specifically to Anna's Guide to Intimate Massage. She describes the process of arousal with a partner. Start by putting one hand on her heart chakra and let the fingers of your other hand caress her inner thighs, working your way to her labia. Use gentle, feather-light stroke, passes and pressure. Go slow here, no exceptions. What's happening here? A reflexive loop. Your touch creates arousal in her. Her arousal, expressed through her breath, her wetness, the sounds she makes, increases your own arousal and guides your next touch, which creates more arousal in her, which guides you further. The belief that this is incredibly pleasurable creates the physiological reality of pleasure, which confirms the belief, which allows for deeper pleasure. This is Soros's reflexivity in action. The fundamentals, her baseline state of arousal, are being actively shaped by the interaction. You are not just discovering her pleasure, you are co-creating it. And here's where Chris's experience is so instructive. He describes the nice guy who tries to impress a woman by catering to her every need, being overly agreeable, never creating any tension. When a nice guy is interacting with her and catering to her every need, without any fluctuation in vibe, boredom is created. Suspense is drained. The nice guy is trying to operate on a false, static model of reality. He thinks if he just inputs enough niceness, the output will be attraction. But he's ignoring the reflexive loop. His neediness creates her discomfort, which makes him try even harder, which pushes her further away. The man who is grounded in himself, who doesn't need her validation, changes the entire dynamic. His lack of neediness allows her to relax. Her relaxation allows her to feel her own desire. Her desire is reflected back to him, amplifying his own grounded presence. It's a self-reinforcing boom of attraction, not of price, but of connection. Key takeaway: markets are not efficient. Relationships are not static. Both are reflexive systems where belief creates reality. And mastering that feedback loop, whether you're trading currencies or tracing a figure 8 on your lover's clitoris, is the key to both profit and pleasure. Chapter 3: The Oracle of Omaha and the Art of Sacred Patience. What we'll learn: Warren Buffett's journey from selling gum door to becoming the world's most revered investor, and how his philosophy of patience, margin of safety, and long-term compounding is the exact same philosophy that unlocks profound intimate experiences. Why it matters: because in a world of high-frequency trading and instant gratification hookups, Buffett's slow, deliberate approach is both a financial strategy and a spiritual discipline, and it will get you laid. Eventually. Gloriously. Warren Buffett was an unusual child. At age 6, he was selling sticks of gum and bottles of Coke door to door. By 12, he was handling stock transactions. He finished high school with savings equivalent to about $53,000 of today's dollars. But the real key to understanding Buffett isn't his precocious business sense. It's his almost autistic fascination with numbers and compounding. As a kid, he discovered the magic of compound interest in a book called 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. The concept seized him. Money, properly invested, grows. And the growth itself grows. And that growth grows. Over time, the curve becomes almost vertical. This is the financial equivalent of what tantric practitioners call building the charge. And it's the exact opposite of what Chris calls the nice guy approach of desperately seeking immediate validation. Buffett is the most famous disciple of Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing. The core idea is simple. A stock is not just a ticker symbol. It's a piece of a real business. And that business has a real, intrinsic value. Graham's method was to buy stocks trading significantly below their intrinsic value, creating a margin of safety. Even if you were wrong, you were protected. Buffett added his own twist. He developed an almost mystical ability to assess the qualitative aspects of a business, what he called its moat, or durable competitive advantage. And here's the crucial part. Once Buffett buys, he holds. For years, for decades. He doesn't care about quarterly earnings. He doesn't care about daily price fluctuations. He's looking at the underlying business, which he understands so deeply that short-term noise is just an opportunity to buy more. Now let's connect this to our other threads. Anna's massage guide emphasizes the same patience, the same focus on underlying fundamentals rather than superficial performance. She writes, "As challenging as it is, avoid the clitoris at this point. Let it thrum and hum and await your touch." This is Buffett avoiding the hot new IPO. He's building the position, creating the conditions, letting the float, in his terms, the investable cash from his insurance companies, accumulate. He's not chasing the quick score. He's building a compounding machine. Chris's journey is a perfect example of applying this principle to personal development. He spent years failing with pickup techniques because he was trying to trade his way to success, looking for the quick score, the hot tip, the magic line. It was only when he committed to the long, slow, often painful process of becoming a genuinely grounded man, a man with a deep moat of self-worth that no single rejection could breach, that he became truly attractive. He stopped trying to time the market of female attention and started building a durable asset, himself. And here's the tantric parallel. The goal of the intimate massage, like the goal of Buffett's investing, is not the quick release. It's the sustained compounding build of energy. Anna writes about techniques like infinity, tracing a figure 8 over the clitoris with one fingertip, going slow. If she gets close to orgasm, you back off. Let her settle and start again. You are edging her, building the charge, letting the energy compound. The result is not a single fleeting spike. It's a full-body, extended experience that can be, in her words, explosive. This requires the same discipline as Buffett's investing. It requires resisting the urge to take profits early. It requires trusting the process even when the short-term results aren't flashy. It requires a margin of safety, the emotional safety that allows her to completely let go, knowing you're not just trying to get your own. Key takeaway. Patience isn't just a virtue. It's a compounding engine. Whether you're building a fortune, building intimacy, or building a self that women are drawn to, the slow, deliberate path creates exponential outcomes that the quick and easy approach can never match. The man who can delay his own gratification is the man who gets everything he wants. Chapter 4. The Inflation Slayer and the Discipline of Containment. What we'll learn. Paul Volcker's epic battle against the great inflation of the 1970s and what it teaches us about the necessity of restraint in monetary policy, in seduction, and in the bedroom. Why it matters, because sometimes the most loving and powerful thing you can do, for an economy, for a woman, or for yourself, is to say not yet. Picture Paul Volcker. 6'7", imposing, gruff, a man who wears rumpled suits, eats hot dogs for lunch, and has spent his entire career cleaning up after other people's financial messes. In 1979, when Volcker became chairman of the Federal Reserve, the American economy was in a death spiral. Inflation was running at more than 1% per month. The dollar was collapsing. There was genuine fear of another 1929, or even a Weimar-style hyperinflation. The standard playbook said this was an impossible situation. To reduce inflation, you had to accept higher unemployment. The numbers were brutal. Every 1% reduction in inflation would cost 3% in employment and 9% in GDP. No politician could accept that. Volcker didn't care. Or rather, he understood that the appearance of not caring was essential. The problem was psychological. Inflation had become embedded in expectations. The reflexive loop was spinning out of control. Volcker's solution was shock therapy. He raised interest rates to an unprecedented 20%. The economy plunged into the deepest recession since the Great Depression. Unemployment hit nearly 10%. Homebuilders mailed him 2x4s from unsold houses. He was the most hated man in America, but he held the line. And by mid-1982, inflation broke. The stage was set for 2 decades of stable growth. Now, what does this have to do with our other narrative? Let's talk about Chris's philosophy of owning your shit and the tantric concept of containing energy. Chris describes a moment when a woman he's just met says, "I'm not having sex with you." The old Chris would have been crushed. The new Chris heard something completely different. He heard, "I want you so bad. I want this, but I'm not sure how you will view me if I do, so I want to wait." His response was not to plead, not to pressure, not to try to close the deal. It was to relax, to hold space, to contain his own desire and let her come to him. This is Volcarism in the bedroom. It's the discipline to say not yet, not out of weakness or puritanical denial, but out of a deeper understanding that delayed gratification and emotional safety yield exponentially greater rewards. He was imposing a kind of disciplined interest rate on his own arousal. It was painful in the short term, but it created the stability, the trust, that allowed for a much deeper, more explosive connection later. Anna's massage guide is a manual for this kind of discipline. Go slow here, no exceptions. She instructs men to avoid the clitoris, to tease, to build. Use gentle feather-light stroke, passes and pressure. This is the opposite of the inflationary easy money policy of the desperate lover. It's a deliberate, contained, disciplined approach that prevents the system from overheating and crashing into a premature, unsatisfying climax. And what happens when you do this? You break the back of the inflationary expectations of bad sex. You establish a new baseline, a new level of trust and connection. You become the man who can handle the heat without losing control. And that, as both Anna and Chris attest, is the man women crave. Key takeaway. Discipline is not the enemy of pleasure. It's the gateway to deeper pleasure. Whether you're managing an economy, managing your own neediness, or managing the rising tide of your partner's arousal, the ability to contain and redirect energy is the mark of mastery. The man who can hold the line is the man who gets the keys to the kingdom. Chapter 5. The Imperial Circle, the Yab-Yum Position, and the Art of the French Hostel. What we'll learn. Soros's mid-1980s investment diary reveals how he navigated the Imperial Circle, and will connect his global macro perspective to the most intimate of tantric positions, and Chris's seduction of a French goddess in a hostel full of competing men. Why it matters. Because understanding how to position yourself in a complex, reflexive system is the same skill whether you're managing a billion-dollar fund, sitting cross-legged with your lover, or being the quietest guy in a room full of desperate players. In 1985, George Soros was running the Quantum Fund and keeping a real-time investment diary. The backdrop was what he called Reagan's Imperial Circle. A strong dollar, strong growth, huge budget and trade deficits. Conventional economics said it was unsustainable, but it was held together by a reflexive loop of high interest rates attracting foreign capital, which strengthened the dollar, which kept inflation low, which justified high growth expectations. Soros understood it was unsustainable, but he also understood that unsustainable things can last a long time. His diary shows him making huge, rapid moves across multiple markets, constantly adjusting his thesis, taking losses without ego and racking up enormous profits. He wasn't married to a single prediction. He was positioned to benefit from the likely evolution of the system. Now, picture the Yab-Yum position from the tantric texts. The man sits cross-legged. The woman sits on his lap, facing him, wrapping her legs around his waist. They gaze into each other's eyes. They breathe together. He is inside her, but there's no thrusting, no striving. Just presence, just connection, just the subtle circulation of energy. This is the tantric equivalent of Soros's macro view. It's a position, a stance in relation to a complex system. It's not about doing, it's about being in a particular configuration that allows energy to flow. And this is exactly what Chris describes in his French hostel beauty seduction. He's in a room full of men, jocks, artists, skaters, all desperately doing, telling their best stories, cracking their best jokes, trying to win the attention of a gorgeous woman. Chris does nothing. He sits on the couch, relaxed, observing. He is the quietest person in the room, and therefore, as he puts it, the strongest person in the room. He is positioned like Soros, waiting for the unsustainable system of the other men's desperate performances to collapse. He is in his own Yab-Yum with himself, grounded, present, aligned. And when the moment is right, he simply stands up, extends his hand and says something utterly absurd. "Want to come beat up some midgets?" She lights up, she takes his hand, and the herd of desperate men collapses in silence. Why does this work? Because he wasn't trying to force an outcome. He was aligned with the underlying dynamics. He understood that her position in the system, surrounded by needy, performing men, was untenable. She was desperate for a way out. He simply provided it. He was the calm center in a storm of beta male anxiety. He was the Soros of the hostel, shorting the inflated egos of his competitors. Key takeaway: mastery, in markets, in intimacy, or in a room full of people, is not about having the one right answer or the best line. It's about having a good thesis about the underlying dynamics, positioning yourself accordingly, and then staying exquisitely attuned to feedback so you can act decisively when the moment is right. The man who does nothing is often the one who gets everything. Chapter 6: The Man Who Broke the Bank of England and the Butterfly Position. What we'll learn: the famous 1992 episode where Soros made $1 billion forcing the devaluation of the British pound, and what it teaches about leverage, asymmetric risk, and the surprising parallel to a tantric position called the butterfly, and the power of a well-timed erotic letter. Why it matters: because sometimes the highest percentage trade is the one that looks the most audacious. And because understanding when a system is forced to change is as valuable in relationships as it is in currency markets. By 1992, the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, ERM, was a disaster waiting to happen. Member countries, including the UK, were forced to keep their currencies aligned with the German mark. Germany had raised interest rates to combat the inflationary effects of reunification. The UK, mired in recession, was forced to follow suit, even though lower rates were desperately needed. The pound was in an untenable position. Soros's chief strategist saw the opportunity and proposed a substantial short position against the pound. Soros's response was legendary. "If you believe all that, why are you betting only 2 or 3 billion?" He leveraged the quantum fund to build a $10 billion short position. On September 16, 1992, Black Wednesday, the Bank of England tried to defend the pound by raising rates to 15%. The market didn't believe it. A global wave of selling overwhelmed them. The UK suspended its ERM membership and the pound dropped 10%. Soros made over $1 billion in one day. Was this a crazy gamble? No. It was an asymmetric trade. The potential downside was limited, maybe $100 million. The potential upside was enormous, $1 billion or more, and the probability of success, given the political and economic realities, was very high. Now, let's talk about Anna's butterfly position and Chris's game-changer erotic letter. In the butterfly position, the woman lies on her back, legs lifted and spread. The man stands or kneels, entering her. The position allows for deep penetration and intense stimulation with minimal effort from the man. It's a position of leverage. A small, subtle movement creates a massive effect. The erotic letter is another form of asymmetric trade. Chris describes how his partner wrote him a handwritten letter detailing exactly what he was going to do to her, setting a date a week in advance. He then spent the week sending little reminders, building the anticipation, but refusing any intimacy. By the time the appointed night arrived, she was aroused all the time, a coiled spring of desire. The man had invested a few minutes of writing and some playful texts. The return was a night of explosive, transcendent sex. The downside? Almost zero. The upside? Practically unlimited. This is intelligent risk, taking in the realm of intimacy. Find situations where you can bet big on an outcome that's highly likely, with limited downside and massive upside. The British pound was forced to devalue by the structure of the ERM. The woman's desire was forced to a peak by the structure of anticipation and denial. In both cases, the trader simply recognized the untenable position and positioned himself to benefit from the inevitable resolution. Key takeaway: the biggest wins come not from forcing outcomes, but from recognizing when outcomes are already forced by the structure of the situation and positioning yourself accordingly. Whether you're shorting a currency or writing a love letter, understand the leverage points and let the system do the work for you. Chapter 7: The Testicle Tug, the G-Spot, and the Art of Delaying Gratification. What we'll learn. The specific tantric techniques for men to delay ejaculation, the art of G-spot stimulation, and what they teach us about the broader principle of delayed gratification that underpins all success, from Buffett's billions to Volcker's victory over inflation to Chris's transformation. Why it matters. Because the ability to delay gratification is the single most reliable predictor of positive life outcomes, in finance, in relationships, in everything, and it's a skill you can learn. Let's get specific. The tantric texts describe the testicle tug and the penis tip squeeze. When you feel the urge to ejaculate building, you physically intervene, pulling down on the testicles or squeezing the tip of the penis. This interrupts the ejaculatory reflex without diminishing arousal. It requires awareness. You can't do it if you're lost in the sensations, rushing toward the finish line. You have to be present enough to notice the signals. You have to have the discipline to interrupt the natural flow. Now think about this in the context of our sages. Warren Buffett's entire career is a testicle tug. When everyone else is rushing to buy the hot new thing, Buffett is sitting on his hands. He's not immune to the excitement. He just has the discipline to interrupt the reflexive urge to join the herd. He waits. He lets the frenzy subside. And then, when everyone else is panicking, he buys. Paul Volcker's inflation fight was the ultimate testicle tug on a national scale. The economy was building toward an inflationary climax. The natural political urge was to let it happen, to enjoy the short-term high. Volcker reached in and squeezed, hard. It was painful, but it prevented a far more catastrophic release. Chris's entire journey from nice guy to ladies' man was one long exercise in learning to tug on his own psychological testicles. He had to learn to interrupt his reflexive urge to seek validation, to perform, to need. He had to sit in the discomfort of not knowing, not having, not being sure. And in that space of disciplined containment, he became powerful. Now, the flip side of this is the G-spot. Anna describes it as a small bumpy region on the upper wall of the vagina. Stimulating it requires patience, the right angle, and above all, a woman who is fully aroused and relaxed. You can't just find it and press. It's a potential that emerges under the right conditions. It's the alpha of female sexuality, the elusive source of excess returns that everyone wants but few know how to generate. And just like alpha, the G-spot is often pursued in ways that are counterproductive. Men poke around mechanically, hoping for a magic button. The tantric approach, like the Buffett approach to finding great companies, is to create the conditions, deep relaxation, trust, presence, the slow build of arousal, in which the potential can naturally emerge. Key takeaway: the impulse toward immediate gratification is natural, but it's not optimal. Learning to recognize the signals, interrupt the reflex, and redirect the energy in your portfolio, in your career, in your own body, is the master skill that separates the sages from the masses. And the rewards, like a G-spot orgasm or $1 billion fortune, are not just bigger, they're qualitatively different. Chapter 8. The Ovarian Lottery, the Mirror Dancer, and Owning Your Shit. What we'll learn. Warren Buffett's concept of the ovarian lottery, the random circumstances of birth that shape our opportunities, and its surprising connection to Anna's mirror dancer technique and Chris's philosophy of owning your shit. Why it matters. Because recognizing what you can and cannot control is the foundation of both wise investing and profound intimacy. And because the most attractive thing you can do is make no apology for who you are. Warren Buffett has a concept he calls the ovarian lottery. You didn't choose to be born in the United States rather than Bangladesh. You didn't choose your parents, your genetic endowments, your early environment. All of these are random draws, and they have an enormous impact on your life outcomes. Buffett's point is not that individual effort doesn't matter. It's that we should be appropriately humble about the role of luck. This humility is not just ethically appropriate, it's practically useful. It keeps you from overestimating your control. It keeps you from taking excessive risks based on the illusion that you're the master of your fate. Now, let's talk about Anna's mirror dancer technique. The man places the woman in front of a large mirror, either sitting or standing. He kneels before her and performs the intimate massage while she watches herself. This is an act of profound worship. It allows her to see herself as a goddess, to connect with her own beauty and pleasure without shame. The man is not the focus. He is the facilitator of her own self-discovery. This is the embodied version of Buffett's ovarian lottery insight. The man is surrendering his ego. He is not the master of this encounter. He is a participant in a system that is larger than him, with its own intelligence. His job is not to control, but to be present and to hold space. And this is the core of Chris's philosophy of owning your shit. He tells the story of his friend Ian, who is 36, unemployed, and living with his mother after a divorce. By society's standards, he's a loser, but Ian owns his situation completely. He makes no apology for it. When women ask what he does, he looks them calmly in the eye and says, "I'm unemployed right now." He is proud of who he is, regardless of his external circumstances, and women find him incredibly attractive. Why? Because he's not trying to hide. He's not performing. He's not letting external circumstances define his self-worth. He is, in his own way, a mirror dancer for himself. He's looking at his own reality without flinching. And that radical self-acceptance is intoxicating. Key takeaway: true mastery is not about exerting control. It's about recognizing what you can't control, humbly accepting the role of luck and circumstance, and then owning your reality so completely that you make no apology for it. A man who owns his shit, whether he's a billionaire or living in his mom's basement, is a man who makes others feel safe, seen and free. And that is the foundation of all genuine attraction. Conclusion: the secret code revealed what we've learned. We've journeyed through the minds of financial titans, tantric masters, a woman who teaches men how to touch, and a man who learned to stop trying. We've discovered that they were all describing the same underlying reality. The principles that govern markets are the principles that govern intimate connection. Why it matters? Because this unified understanding gives you a framework for navigating any complex, reflexive system. Whether you're managing a portfolio, a relationship, or your own desperate ego, the skills are the same. So here we are, at the end of our strange and winding journey. We've explored the collapse of Bretton Woods and the yab-yum position. We've connected the testicle tug to the art of delaying gratification. We've seen how the imperial circle and a crowded hostel bar both teach the power of quiet, grounded presence. What's the unified lesson? Reality is reflexive. What you believe shapes what happens. In markets, in relationships, in your own nervous system. The feedback loop between perception and reality is the fundamental dynamic. Patience compounds. Whether you're building a fortune or building intimacy, the slow, deliberate path creates exponential results that the quick and easy approach can never match. Discipline liberates. The ability to contain and redirect energy, to say not yet to the impulse for immediate release, is what allows you to reach states that are inaccessible to the undisciplined mind. Asymmetry is opportunity. Find the situations where the potential upside dwarfs the potential downside, and where the structure of the situation all but guarantees the outcome.